So welcome everybody to the School Improvement Institute video and webinar on data collection. My name is Sue Reynolds and I'm president of the American Student Achievement Institute. So as I was saying before we started recording, this is one of my favorite steps in the process. It's when we start to collect data, and there's so many stories in that data that's compelling, not only about achievement, but about why students aren't achieving at the rate that you want them to. So this is what we'll be talking about today. We'll very quickly review the vision to action process, and then we'll provide an overview and tips on this month's tasks, which are collecting the data that you'll be using in your council discussions. So very quickly to review the process, last month we started getting ready. We talked about your organizational structure, you put together your steering team, and you delegated tasks. That task delegation is really important. It makes the whole process manageable. And you have 2 members on your steering team who are responsible for collecting data. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we hope that they're participating in this webinar in that they're able to understand the content today and also ask questions so that when you leave this webinar, you are ready to go in terms of collecting your data. So that step is complete in terms of delegating tasks, and now this month we're going to do the data collection, and then next month we'll talk about your vision, and then in March we'll look at setting goals, and we'll begin by looking at the baseline data that you're collecting right now. So part of what we're doing this month in collecting data we'll be using in March as we start to set your school's achievement goals. Then in April we'll start to look at what's getting in the way of achievement, and at that point we'll pull in another set of data that we're also collecting now. So this month you'll be collecting your root cause data, and then we'll bring that data back in April to start to figure out why kids aren't succeeding at the level that you want them to. Okay, and then going on in May, we'll look at what are we going to do about the whys, and we'll start to put together your interventions or your strategies, and then preparing to implement those strategies will occur in May as well. I mentioned earlier we have put together a steering team. That step is done, and you've delegated your tasks. So 2 people on your steering team are responsible for collecting the data. One person is the achievement data point person. So as we talk through collecting that achievement data, you really want to make sure if you're the achievement data point person that you get it. And the other person is the root cause data point person. And again, if you're that person, make sure that you understand how to collect this root cause data. Now, I want to emphasize that the 2 people who are in charge of this will not be doing all of the work. They're going to delegate tasks so that everybody has a role to play. So we'll talk and give you some ideas about how you might delegate this data collection. But again, that's why we're having the entire steering team watch this video, because you're all going to play a role under the direction of the achievement data point person and the root cause data point person in collecting this data. So, okay, so let's talk now about data and how we use data in RSC. So very, very, very important. There are 2 types of data. One of the things that we've seen schools do before they start working with us is to mix different types of data up, and it just gets really confusing about what we're trying to accomplish. So we want it to be very clear that there's achievement data, and there's another kind of data that we call root cause data. So let's make sure we're going to define those 2 terms, and before we go on, we want to make sure that all of the people participating in this webinar understand these terms. So achievement data. Achievement data tells us the degree to which students are learning. So it's math data and language arts data and science data. It's the achievement data. So sources of achievement data are state tests like ISTEP and ECA, and other tests that your schools may give like NWEA or NAEP. Also student transcripts, so we can look at report card grades or credits or things like that. It can also be individual classroom tests or a test that you've created in your district that maybe all of your fifth graders take. So it can be a classroom assessment at all, but it's academic in nature. It's science, language arts, social studies, math, world languages, you know, it's that content. It is not attendance, because attendance is not a measure of achievement. Attendance would be the other kind of data. That's the root cause data. So root cause data tells us why students are not reaching your goals. So there's going to be two sources that we provide. You may have other sources of data within your school, but we'll look at surveying students about choices that they make, about things that they do to help us understand what's getting in the way of achievement. And then we'll also provide for your school a list of questions that will help you assess the degree to which your school is implementing best practices in learning. So, so we'll look at what students say. We'll also look at the self-study to see, you know, if you've got best practices in place. Okay, so we want to make sure right now that there's no questions about these terms. It's if you start mixing up achievement data and root cause data, it just messes everything up. So if you have any questions about that, type them in right now. Tina, I'm going to check with you in a second to make sure that we don't have any questions about these two terms. So we've got achievement data and root cause data. If you're watching this as an archived version with your steering team, maybe you're on holiday break still and so you're watching this later, I would go ahead and pause the video right now and just make sure that everybody on your team understands those two terms. So Tina, do we have any questions that have come up?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm assuming then that everybody understands those two terms. That's good. So the first part that I want to talk about is achievement data. So achievement data that you collect this month is going to be used in our when we get to the goals step. And so here's how we express achievement data. So we always give the benchmark that we want students to reach, the student group that we want to reach that benchmark, and then there will be baseline data and then target data. So we would express achievement data this way. The percentage of third graders who read at grade level, our baseline data is 65%, and then our target data may be 66% or 80%, or you know, we'll determine that later. So another example, the percentage of free and reduced lunch students who earn a 3 or better on an AP test, our baseline data is 11%. So we've got a student group. It can be all students, or it can be a grade level, or it can be a student and gender, boys, girls. You know, the student group can be a subgroup, or it can be all students. And then there's the benchmark, and then later we'll drop in the baseline data and the target data. Now, also when we're talking about target data, we always give a timeline. So our timeline is always going to be 1 year. So if we're at 65% right now, where could we be a year from now? So we'll always do increments and goals in 1 year increments, and then we'll work to reach that goal, and then we'll set another goal, and then we'll work to reach that goal. So the one thing on this slide to pay attention to, though, is that we've got a student group, we've got a benchmark. Those are the two key parts of how we express data. Okay, again, we've said that your achievement data sources can be state tests, and our system auto-populates your state test data into our system, so you don't have to type that in. That we used to have to do that, and it's very time-consuming. So I'm really glad that our tech staff developed a way to just auto-populate that from DOE's website. Now, we are only able to obtain data from DOE that is public, And there is some data that we need that is given to schools privately. It's not available to the public. So there are a couple of data points that you'll end up typing in, like standards mastery data. So if we ask you to type in some state level data, that's because the data is not public. Also, sometimes DOE publishes data 2 years after an assessment is given for some reason. So until DOE publishes the data, we can't get it. So you'll see in that case we'll say use the data that's most recent, and you'll say but that's data from 2 years ago, and we'll say okay, then that's the best data we have. So we always want to use the most current data we have, and sometimes the most current data is not always available to us because the publisher of the assessment hasn't made that data available yet. So okay, so state tests. And then there's another data source. We call these data fields SI2 required data fields, and they are typed in by you. So this takes some time, obviously, and this is a place where if you are the achievement data point person, you might want to delegate some of this. You might want to ask one of the steering team members to do the to type in the standards data, the end of course assessment standards mastery data, or another person to type in the Core 40 progress data. So you don't have to do this all yourself. You can delegate that. So I'll show you how that gets typed in when we get to the online system. These are all data fields that we feel are incredibly important for you to look at as you're looking at student achievement. Promotion rates, mastery grades, high school credits, standards mastery, college course performance in high school. They're things that will help you assess your achievement of all of your students. So anything that wasn't pertinent, we've removed from our system because we know that schools have limited time. So we're only asking you to collect things that we think are really important to the study of your school. So, okay. So then there's also the opportunity for you to create some optional data tables, and I'll show you how to do that. For example, we had a school, an elementary school once, that had a school-created assessment that they called the Rainbow Test, and every fifth grader took it, and so they created a table where they could put in the data from their Rainbow Test. So, or there may also be other kinds of publishers like NWEA, Terra Nova, Dibbles, NAEP, you know, that you're using that assessment in your school, and we want to make sure that we've captured that data into our assessment of your school with your council, and in this case with your steering team. Okay, then I need to define for you what is a mastery grade. This is going to help us with a key discussion later about about what your transcripts and your report cards are saying to people. So a mastery grade would be a report card grade that usually indicates that a student has mastered or will master the state's academic standards and is reasonably expected, therefore, to pass the state test. So in your school, probably you would think, okay, if a student was getting all A's in their report cards, they'd probably be in math and language arts, they'd probably pass the state test. So an A would be a mastery grade. A B, yeah, in our school, usually kids that get B's, you know, end up passing ISTEP and the ECAs, and so B is a master grade. C, that's where schools usually have to start thinking, is a C a mastery grade? Is a C really a good grade at your school? Does that mean mastery? And we'll talk later for parents. Most parents think a C is an acceptable grade, or a lot of parents think that a C is an acceptable grade. And if it ends up meaning that C is not a mastery grade, then that needs to be communicated to parents. So we'll talk about that later. We just need you to determine at your school what is a grade that if it appears in the report card, it means that the student is likely to have mastered the academic standards. Okay, So again, later as a steering team, you'll want to determine what your school's mastery grade is. And how are you going to figure that out? Is it going to be just the principal that says, you know, okay, a B is a mastery grade, or is it going to be a group or your steering team, you know, a different committee of folks, or, you know, how are you going to do that? And then how are you going to communicate that to teachers, students, and parents? If you decide, like we had one school that when they started doing some studies, they discovered that a majority of students who got B's on their report card did not pass I-STEP. And so they had to communicate to parents, you know, a B is not okay. You know, you really need your kids to get A's in our school. So so a sample statement: students who pass state tests usually earn A's and B's on their report card. That would be how you might communicate this to students and parents. That way everybody knows that if if we're looking for an A or B, or if we're looking to pass state tests, we need to be looking at A's and B's on the report card. Okay. So let's talk now about data entry. So another thing you'll need to discuss is, do you want to monitor any optional data? NWEA, Terra Nova, the Rainbow Test, you know, is there optional data that as you're looking at everything we ask you to look at and in all the state tests, is there optional data that you're going to want to assess? Who's going to collect the data, and then who's going to enter it into the online system? And obviously that deadline is incorrect. When we get to the online system, the correct data will be there. Deadline will be there. Okay, so those are things you'll need to talk about as a steering team. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears now. That was achievement data, and I'll show you how to enter that online in a sec. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about root cause data. Remember, root cause data we're going to talk about much later, and that's data that's going to help us understand why students aren't achieving at the level that we want them to. So we're going to interview kids, teachers, parents, community members, and then we're going to do some self-studies in there. So here are the data sources. So one is the surveys, the SI2 surveys. There are 4 different kinds of surveys: student survey, teacher survey, parent, and community members. For the students, we would like you to survey 95% of your student body. We have found that if you go to the effort of surveying, or when you go to the effort of surveying all of your students, that data, when you discuss it, is really compelling. If you have only surveyed a third of your kids, what happens is that when you get into the discussion mode, if there is data that you don't like or somebody disagrees with, what they'll tend to say is, well, the survey must not have been a random selection of kids, and this data, it doesn't really represent our students. If you've surveyed all the kids, they can't say that. The other thing it does when you survey all the students is that enables the student groups who have a small number of students, like maybe your Hispanic student group or your Asian student group or whoever, it allows there to be enough students in that group that we can report data to you and still meet our confidentiality standards. So when you survey all students, it allows us to give you breakdown data for very small student groups, which we think is helpful for you. Okay, so we're surveying 95% of the teachers, or students, 95% of the teachers. I'll give you some suggestions in a second about how to do that. At least 30 parents, and again, we'll give you suggestions on how to reach parents, and at least 30 community members that are not parents. Okay, so that's one type of data source, the surveys. And then the other data source is some question sets that you'll answer online. So there are 2 question sets that all SI2 schools will answer. The first one are the SI2 questions. These are based on our Elements of High Achieving Schools. That was written after our observations of our top gainer schools for the past 20 years, as well as a literature review of what best practices look like. So this is a self-study based on our expertise that you'll answer. So depending on your building level, there's 25 to 42 short answers. Then all SI2 schools will also answer a series of questions around Indiana's turnaround principles. We really like the Indiana turnaround principles. We think thinking about those principles really helps you to make some good assessments of your building. There are a lot of them. There's 133 principles that DOE or not principles, 133 indicators that DOE has published. So we put that in the system as just yes/no questions. So you'll read through and you'll just say, does our school do this? Yes. Does our school do that? No. And you'll just read through those and answer them. So that's going to go pretty quick because there's no narrative to it. It's just yes or no's. So all SI2 schools will answer these questions. Then, if you are a focus or priority school, we also put in a set of questions that's going to help you think about and assess the factors, best practices that DOE says are important for focus and priority schools. So if you are a focus or priority school, this is enabling you to do a self-study from the perspective of the things that DOE thinks is important for a focus and a priority school. And actually there are things we think are important as well. Same thing with Title I school-wide. If you're school-wide, there's an additional 24 questions. These are yes/no questions that ask you if you're doing the things that Title I thinks are important for a school-wide school to do. And then same thing with Title I tasks. So if you are SI2, turnaround, and focus priority, you're going to have a chunk of questions to answer on this self-study. Again, this is where I would say delegate. So if you are the root cause data point person, I'd say to maybe your principal, will you do the turnaround questions, and say to one of your counselors, will you do fill out these SI2 questions. So again, delegate. You don't have to do everything yourself. And I just picked on the principal and the counselor, not for any reason. So okay. So that's the data sources. So on these types of questions, I think I kind of mentioned this, but we've aligned these question sets with different documents. So for the SI2 questions, it's the Elements of High Achieving Schools that we published. For the turnaround principles, it's the DOE turnaround principle rubric. Focus and priority, it's the focus priority monitoring guide that DOE publishes. And then same thing for Title I, it's the monitoring guide that DOE has published. So these questions just didn't come out of the air randomly. We are aligning this work with our best knowledge and with things that the Indiana Department of Education has published. That aligns your work with us and with the Department of Ed, which is nice. Okay, so here's some tips. For surveying students, what you'll do is distribute the survey codes, which I'll show you how to get those in a minute, and the survey web address to your teachers. And just ask all of your teachers to survey the students that they have at a given time or a given period on a specific day or week at some point during the survey window. So for example, if you're in a high school, you could say to your second period teachers, here is the survey web address, here are the survey codes that the kids will need when they start the survey, and in second period, at some point during the next several weeks, or you'll give them a deadline, at some point in this survey window, will you please give this survey to your second period students? So yeah, so that is, I think, just the easiest way to do it. That way the teachers can work the survey into when it fits the best into their day. You can explain to them that this is going to help with school improvement, it's going to help raise achievement, it's going to help all of you understand, the needs that kids have that are making it difficult for them to reach the goals that you are that you will have in your school improvement plan. So yeah, so I think that's just the easiest way to survey students. If you're in an elementary school, you could say, whoever you have at 9 o'clock on Tuesdays, please survey them at some point during the next 4 weeks or during the survey window. Okay, so that's the student survey. The teacher survey, what a lot of schools will do is just ask their teachers to bring a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone to a staff meeting, and then you'll spend 10 minutes during your staff meeting taking the survey. Another thing you could do is just email the teacher survey and the code and the survey web address to all of your teachers, and just ask them at their convenience to within the survey window to take the survey. One of our, or actually this has been more than once, several of our schools have attached the survey code and the survey web address to a candy bar and put it in their teacher's mailbox and said, please enjoy this candy bar as you're taking the survey. So, different ways, but we just need every teacher in the building to take that survey. On parent surveys, here's what some schools have done that I think have been pretty effective. If you have a newsletter that's going home, you can ask have an article about the survey, give the parents the survey web address and the survey parent survey code, and ask them to take the survey at home. That idea I don't like so much, because if some parents, your low-income parents, don't have computers at home or whatever, or a smartphone, that makes it that's going to skew your data a little bit. So another thing schools have done is we had a school that put a sticker on an assignment, and the sticker said, please take the survey, here's the address and here's the code. And then to make sure that the parents read that, they had some kind of prize for the kids that had their parent initial the sticker and brought it back to school. So another idea is that to give parents a ticket at a ball game, or a piece of paper at a ball game that has the survey code and the survey web address, and then during halftime ask everybody to get out their smartphones if they're a parent, and spend 10 minutes taking the survey. We've had a lot of schools do that. And then if there's going to be parents in your building for some reason, you could open up the computer lab and ask the parents, during the event to go to the computer lab to take the survey. And then we've had a couple schools also get the public library involved to just put up a table at the library where when parents go to the library, they can sit down and take the survey. Again, that would not be my favorite method of doing this, because I think you're not going to get a random selection of parents. You'd have data for parents that visit the library, which probably would not be typical, or not like all parents. So, okay, so those parent survey tips. The community survey, oh my gosh, we've really had schools get creative with this. It's really kind of fun to hear how all the different ideas that schools have come up with. So, so the first idea is just like with the parents, as people come in, to find out, do you live in our community? Are you parents? No, they're not a parent. Then they would get a different slip of paper that had the community code on it. And you'd ask them at halftime to take the community member assessment. One of my favorite ways is to ask the local Chamber of Commerce to have their members take the survey during a chamber meeting. You're getting all kinds of folks that way. You might also, in combination with that, ask service clubs or faith-based organizations and others where groups of adults will convene to give the survey during one of their meetings, or at least to distribute information about the survey. I think that's been a very, very successful way. If you think about who attends Kiwanis Club meetings, I mean, it's all kinds of folks. So I think you'd have a pretty random selection of individuals. Another idea, we had a school that put a table in front of the grocery store, and they asked adults to take the survey as they entered the store. We had another school put their table on the bread aisle, and as people picked up bread, they took the survey. Another idea is to send someone into industry, maybe manufacturing industry, and during shift breaks, ask people to survey during their breaks. That's actually been very successful. And then having a door-to-door campaign to ask local businesses to survey. So, you'd go downtown to the square or wherever and just go door-to-door with a handout and asking business people to take your survey. So one word of caution on the community survey is there are going to be a lot of questions that the community members won't know the answers to. And in a way, for some of them it gets kind of frustrating because they go down all the survey questions and they're saying I don't know on every single question. But that's really good information for you to understand, is if your community is out of touch with what's going on in your schools, maybe that's an area that you need to work on. So I don't know is a legitimate and a valid answer, and it probably will be used a lot on the community survey. On the other hand, if you're a school that's really worked on community outreach and you have a lot of community partnerships and communities in your building all the time, you won't get I don't know because they'll know. So that'll be valid information that we'll look at later. Okay, so data entry. The discussion that your steering team needs to have is who's going to be responsible for surveying the students, the teachers, the parents, the community, and even with the students, you could delegate that task to who's going to tell the teachers about this initially, who's going to follow up to make sure every teacher did it with the teachers. With the students, you might delegate it to who's going to be responsible for for the same thing, for making sure that teachers know how to give the survey and that they're following up. Okay, who's going to answer the ASA question set? Who's going to answer the turnaround questions? Who's going to ask the focus priority questions? And who's going to answer the title questions? And again, this deadline hasn't been updated, my apology. So, okay, so those are things you'll need to delegate as you get organized. Okay, I'm going to go through this online then, and we'll go, oops, that's an old slide. Let's see here. So I'm going to go online, and I'm logged in as demo school. And remember, when you log in, let me pause here real quickly before I go to this part. And Tina, any questions that people have typed in?
There was one request that
Okay.
We get the slides from this webinar to be shared after it's finished.
Absolutely. So I'll show you where those slides will be, and I appreciate that because I had a computer glitch right before we started the webinar, and I didn't get to take out those last slides, and I would much rather have you have a copy that's got Tina's wonderful face on the end of that, offering you to help you. So so what we'll do is this. I'll show you right now where it's going to be. In the manual page, on collecting data collection video slides. So it will be right there, and the video will be here, and just the slides without the video will be in this place. So yeah, right now you can download the PowerPoint that we're looking at from your control panel. We haven't updated this yet. I usually do that right after the video, right after the webinar. So if you need something immediately, you can download it from the control panel. But immediately following the webinar, you'll be able to, well, like within an hour, well, probably first thing tomorrow morning, you'll be able to download the slides here from the manual page. Okay, Tina, is there anything you want to add to that?
This is just another question that was brought up, and I'm seeing a little bit of a glitch as I'm answering these questions, so I wanted to make sure that the answer got out there.
Okay.
This concerned the younger students taking the survey. There was a little concern maybe about the kindergarten kids,
Yeah.
which of course I told them that those are all very developmentally designed.
Yes,
for the age appropriateness, so you can go ahead with that if you would, please.
Yeah, we can look at some of those questions in a minute. So, and that's we'll see this as we get into the online system. But and great question, by the way. I really like questions like that because it helps me understand maybe where I left something out or maybe where I didn't explain something clearly. And I love going back to re-explain something that maybe didn't get across. So thank you for your questions. So in the younger elementary ages, the K2, we're not serving those students online. We do that in the classroom. There's very few questions. We have the kids put their heads down, and the teacher then will ask the question. And it's a raise your hand if, and students will raise their hands. So on those questions, then what we do is you'll tally up all the students who raised their hands from in the different classrooms, and then you'll just type that number into the online system. I'll show you that in a minute, and I'll be able to show you some of those questions as well. Very good. Good point, Tina. Other questions or things that maybe I need to go over again, Tina, from your perspective?
That's all for right now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So let's scroll down here to the data collection. So this introduction, let me just open that up real quickly. This is something too, if you want to have just a written document to pass out to anyone for any reason. This just is an introduction of how we do data. There's achievement data that we use on goal setting, and then the root cause data that we use to establish the root cause. So it's a little two-pager that kind of goes over what we've been talking about. Okay, the webinar's here. So let's look at entering achievement data. So this is this is ASA required data. I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and you'll see here that here's all of the SI2 data fields. So the school that I'm enrolled as is a demo school. It has grades K through 12 in it, so you'll see there's lots of different data fields here. If you're in elementary school, you're not going to see AP potential. So let's just look at which are these? Let's just look at AP potential, just the first one, so you can see how it works. So here's the page that opens up, and you can see at the top of the page we give you the student group and the benchmark and the data source where you're going to find this data. So and then we might give you some notes up here to help you think about something. Usually this will be blank. So then we're saying that right now that we're looking for data from the 15-16 school year. So we don't have data yet, year-end data from the 16-17 year for this data field. So we're looking for data from last school year. If for some reason you wanted to change that, you could change it, but this will default to the data year that we're looking for. Okay, so right now our table is blank. We're going to click Enter Edit, and what we're going to do is in each of these rows, we're going to put in the number of students. So let's say for all students, let's say I have, let's say I have 1,000 students in the building. And then this is AP potential. We're going to say from this report, on that report, of the 1,000, nope, that's not going to be right. Hang on, let me move back. Because what I didn't do properly is I didn't read the student group, and I was thinking all students in the building. That's why it's really important to read the student group. So we're looking at this student group is 9th, 10th, 11th graders who took the PSAT. That's probably not going to be 1,000. It's probably going to be more like, I don't know how many, let's say 75. And then you're going to say of that group, how many in this case showed AP potential on biology, how many showed AP potential on calculus, English language arts. So every table will look like this. So you'll fill that out across. And then we're looking at the drill down data. This is time consuming the first year that you do it. Most of our schools figure out a way to flag this data so that the next time that they have to do it is not nearly as time consuming. So what I'd want to do is I've got tally sheets. I'm going through all of the PSAT results, and I'm saying, okay, of that 75, 40 were females, 35 were males, and there were, of the 40 females, there were 20 of those 40 females that showed AP potential in biology. There were 15 of the males that showed AP potential in biology. So this is, you know, kind of time consuming the first time you do it. Most of our schools, once they see how important it is to have that drill down data, they figure out ways to have their systems in-house start to tally that data by the drill down groups for them. So, okay, then we're going to, I'm going to click Save Changes, Complete Chart Later, and we'll save. And now I'm going to go back to the charts. And oops, nope, before I do that, I want to show you that the see how the system tallied the percentage for you. So I know that there are 43% of all students who took the PSAT who showed AP potential in biology, and there's a 7-point gap between my males and my females. So you know that you may decide that you want to encourage males to, or provide some support for males to close that gap. That's something we'll discuss later. So, okay, so now I'm going to go back to the chart list, and if I had selected that I was finished entering that data, like I'll go ahead and do that so you can see. So I'm going to go back to this table, I'm going to go back to the Enter Edit, and I'm not finished, but I'm just going to say I am finished. Entry is complete. Now I'm going to go to the data chart. And you can see there's a check here now that tells me, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. So again, if you are the achievement data point person, you know, you might find 9 different people to help you and give one the responsibility of just working with that AP data. You can start to see when we're starting to disaggregate that data that's going to be time consuming to figure out, you know, male, female, ethnicity, all of that. Okay. So that's how they enter the data. The data is, you know, all the tables kind of look like that. Okay. The other just things to point out on this page is that when you open this up on your screen, there will be ISTEP and ECA data up in this part. Anything that we were able to capture from DOE will already be in here. So we're only entering here the SI2 required. So, okay. Then the third part of this page is down at the bottom is where you create your school charts that are optional, anything else that you want to do. So I'm going to create a new chart, just kind of so I can show you how to do that. I'm going to call this chart let's call the sunshine test. And the student group, let's say this is going to be for 4th graders. The benchmark is that they answer 95% of the questions correctly. The data source is teacher records, and there's no notes. I'm going to save and continue. And this page is asking you if you want to, how you want to enter the data into the chart. So do you have is the data that you're putting in the number of students who have reached the benchmark or the percentage of students who have reached the benchmark? So if I put in the number of students, the computer is going to calculate the percentage for me. If I put in the percentage of students, the computer is going to work that backwards and tell you the number of students that percentage represented. So 99.9% of the time it's going to be numbers that you'll enter in. However, on DIBELS, there's one DIBELS report where your schools are given the percentage without a number of students. So just for that one report, we created this option. So I'm going to go ahead and click numbers, and 99% of the time, that's what's going to happen. Then it's asking me, do I want a top chart or a side chart? And here's examples. In a top chart, I'm going to have my student breakdowns along the side, and I'm going to have my data labeled at the top. In a side chart, I'm going to have my data labels at the side, and then just the number that meet this label over here. So so most of the time I'm doing most of the time I think you'll want top charts, but again it just depends on how you want that table to appear. So I'm going to create a top chart, and at this point I'm being asked, is the number of students for each part of this table going to be the same, or is it going to change? For example, if I were to create a chart for I-STEP mastery, and I wanted to mastery of standards, and I wanted to have both language arts and math on this one chart, but I know that those tests were given on different days, and so I had a different number of students actually taking the test, then I'd want a different student numbers. But in my case, this Sunshine test was given on one day, and the same number of students took every part of it. So I'm going to say same number, and again, we give you some examples here, and then that example of what that would look like. So, okay, so I'm going to do the same student number, and you'll see down here, we're going to preview the chart as it's being made. So I'm going to say, let's say on this Sunshine test that there is that there are math questions on it, and I'm wanting to know, did they answer 95% of the math questions correct? There's language arts questions, and then let's say all questions. So maybe that's how I want to set it up. So right now, this chart is going to look like this. I'm going to be able to type in the number that had the 95% or better in math, and that'll give me the percentage, the number that had 95% or better in language arts, and the percentage, and then in all questions, the number and the percentage. I'll type in the number, and it'll give me the percentage. If you want to show the disaggregation, you just click Include Disaggregations, and now I've got a table where I can enter disaggregated data as well. So this is, especially helpful, I think, for schools that are giving NWEA, Terra Nova, or the NAEP assessment, where you want that to be part of your school improvement assessment, is looking at that data. It's also really helpful for schools that give a series of assessments to make sure that students are progressing. So we have a lot of schools that will give an assessment every 2 weeks. They're in-house created assessments, but they're wanting to make sure that students are having progress. And when students aren't making progress, then they drop those kids into an extra help program. So, if that's the case, you could create these extra tables for those in-house assessments that you've created. So, okay. So that is entering the achievement data, and I'm going to go back here to the process tab. Tina, any questions?
No, not right at the moment.
Okay, that sounds good. So that's entering achievement data. Now, this is how we conduct the surveys. I'm going to click on, let's look at the student survey first. I'm going to click on this icon, and that's giving me instructions. So it's saying that to take the survey, students will need the code above, and then they'll need this address. So there's the survey address. The survey can be taken on any computer or mobile device with a browser and an internet connection. And then we usually put some tips in here. So so if you're having teachers give the assessment, the teachers would simply tell the students, go to this address, and the first question the student's going to get is to please type in a code. So you're saying to kids, if you're a 3rd grader, type in this code. If you're a 4th grader, type in that code. If you're a 10th grader, type in this code. So the students need to type in the correct code. That's really important. That tells us that that student is a 6th grader in your building. So that's how we survey the students in grades 3 through 12. Then for the younger grades, we're giving the teachers a tally sheet. So here's what it looks like. So here's instructions for the teachers, and first thing the teacher is going to do is they're going to say, okay, I'm surveying 18 kids. They tell their kids to put their heads down, and they ask the first question. My teacher is happy. Raise your hand if you think your teacher is happy. Kids raise their hand, they put it down. My teacher wants me to do my best work. Kids raise their hand. I pay attention in class. Kids raise their hand. So there's 20 questions on the kindergarten survey. Okay, so that's how it works. And then on that for the tally surveys, not the online surveys, we need to type that information into the computer. So if you have grades 1 through 2, in this conduct the survey, in the entry, you'd click there, click on kindergarten after you've surveyed, and then you're just going to write in how many kids agreed with that statement. Okay? Okay, so that's pretty simple. So that's how we're surveying. And then the root cause, I'm not going to go over all of these, but let's just show you one. Here is ASA's root cause study. And then I click on enter, and I'm going to get a bunch of questions. List the extra help programs and activities at your school. For each activity or program, list the percentage of students who are currently participating, and then use data from, and then it will give you a year. So in this case, 16, 17. So you'd enter that. This is information we're going to study later to see what practices your school has in place that's promoting academic success or maybe hindering academic success. There's also some questions in here that we need to ask for PL 221. So some of these questions are, if they appear a little random, it might be because it's something we're doing to make sure that you're compliant with PL 221. As you scroll down through these root cause questions, let me show you one more. Here's the turnaround questions, and you'll see on this one, this is going to align with DOE's rubric items, and you see it's just all yes or no. So you read the statement, yes or no. Okay. And then one other thing in this is, notice here that root cause self-study for focus schools, this is not hot and it's not linked. And that's because I'm not a focus school. So let's say that that in the middle of doing this you think, whoa, that should be hot. We are a focus school. Well, the reason that that is not hot is because when you do the uses tab, you didn't check focus, and so that is not hot. So anything, if you find a problem in there, go to the uses page, and you may need to adjust this if you didn't enter it the way you wanted to the first time. Okay, so that's the root causes, and then the rubric items. Let's look at those real quickly. So the achievement data from the previous year has been added. Available data from the first semester of the current year has been added to the ASA requested charts. Achievement data from the previous, oops, that's up there twice. We'll fix that. It's probably up there twice because I put all grades K through 12 in my building, but I'll check that. At least 95% of the students have surveyed, 95% of the teachers, 30 parents, 30 community members. On the root causes, all questions have been answered, all questions are answered. So in this question, on the root causes self-study, Indiana rules and regs, we'll check to make sure that you've answered each of these questions because this is something that we have to verify to DOE that you've done for PL 221. Okay, so yeah, so pretty easy rubric. Just need to make sure that all the steps are finished. Okay, I think that's it. Tina, questions, or Tina, anything that you want to reiterate or Anything you want to add in would be great.
There aren't any other questions right now, but I know this part looks very daunting.
Yeah.
I know the first time I saw it, I felt the same way, but you will be amazed at what you're doing right now is you're building your foundation. And based on those SIP uses, the most exhaustive research that you can do on this part will work so well for you down the road, because it will fill in so many blanks and save time down the road when you start looking at root causes and interventions, because you will have the data in hand, and that data will become just absolutely priceless through these surveys, through this achievement data, and through the self-studies. So just, don't give up on it. Really, really dig in and really get some good information on this, and really push on those surveys. And if you have any questions or you need a pep talk, give me a call.
That sounds good, yeah. And Tina's absolutely right. One of the things I always think is fun is when we get to the root cause, the month where we're looking at root causes, there are so many interesting stories in that data, in terms of, what choices are kids making, what opportunities do we provide them, and things like, one of my favorite questions is, do the adults in your life have high expectations of you? And then we ask the parents, do you have high expectations of your student? And we ask the teachers, do you have high expectations of your students? And the adults will always say, yes, we have high expectations of our kids. And the kids will always say, no, they don't really have high expectations as enough of me. And then that just gets wonderful discussions started. I mean, it's a great time. We often have trouble getting people to leave meetings when we're looking at that data, because it's just so interesting. So, but this is key. This is key to SI2. It's why we get the achievement gains that we get in our schools. And then one other thing is that I hope if you are a Title I school, or you're Title I in focus priority, I hope you're seeing that we're bringing everything under one umbrella. This, for so long in schools, we heard from them, we have a Title I improvement plan, we have a focus priority improvement plan, we have a PL 221 improvement plan, and we have our own improvement plan. And they were all different. So this is bringing everything into one umbrella, which I think is going to be very time saving for you. So, okay. Any other questions, Tina, before we close?
That looks like it.
Okay, very good. So I'm glad Tina gave you the pep talk, and this is really a key step, and one that's going to be very important later. So in the next month, we'll start meeting with your council, or I'm sorry, we'll start having the discussion about the steps of the process, and we'll start talking about the dreams, the vision. So, okay, that sounds good. Thank you all for participating, and we will talk to you next month. Thanks, everyone.